Good morning. Louder. Good morning. Good. Thank you. This is a meeting in the series of meetings that we had announced early on about how we're going to talk about RethinkLex, the things that we're going to do. And today you're going to have a number of people that are going to hold this microphone and talk to you. Some about experiences that they're having and some of the outcomes, and hopefully you can all chime in and be part of the discussion. You can see we've got, like I said, a number of speakers. It's really, I call it the team effort today. And let me just give you a quick update of RethinkLex. You know, once we announced that we're going to pause after November the 11th, we now have well over 700 submissions in all forms. We've got emails, we've got things that went to RethinkLex, we've got things that went to FormStack, we've got a couple of things that came from the outside. We have evaluated better than 60% of those right now. By evaluating, I mean that somebody has read them and picked the primary division where it belongs, or even a secondary division. Is it among 2 or 3 divisions that need to work together? So our output then to those divisions will be by division. Now we've got a few more to go and to read because they came in this past week. Again, this is not over. We call it a pause. We got to figure out how to evaluate what we've got. There are duplicates. There's no doubt about that. There are some items which have come in several different forms. Some are suggestions, some are complaints, some are process related, some are outcome related, but there are similar. We're trying to find where there are similarities and make sure that we send them to the same division. But if there are some anomalies that occur, we might miss the right division. But anyway, I just wanted to give you that as a way of what we are doing with them. Again, remember there's a process to this. Once we send it back to the division then can figure out internally, is it something we can do? Is it something that needs investment? Is it something that we need to work with another division? Or is it something that we just need to be on hold for right now because there's no way of addressing it? So now we put out some dates early on and said, oh, by November the 11th, we'd like to have everything back. Well, we're finding out that things are going to take longer. You all got work to do. So you're not abandoning your work. We're asking you to do this on top of what you do. We have met with several groups who have a number of shifts, and fire is one of them. And actually, there were 4 people from fire that came to a lunch and learn, and we talked about how do we best address the people that have multiple shifts. You know, they only have maybe a half an hour on their second or third shift. What do we do in half an hour? So we talked about how we might be able to stagger the discussion. We start out with something, they come back maybe another time and figure out some of the discussion and what we could capture as potential ways that we can improve our processes. We have people that have very, very large organizations, and they're very distributed. And I always pick on parks because they're the ones that have most distributed organization, multiple folks. Again, they have kind of figured out how they're going to make this work. And that's why we are no longer really looking at what I call sort of the hard and fast dates. All right. These are the top 3 that have come in. And why did we pick the top 3? We picked the top 3 because they affect most employees. I'm not saying that they're going to be the top 3 going forward. I can't tell you how many times direct deposit has come in. It's come in over and over and over again because it complicates the process. So that's all I'm going to say about it, because Tammy's going to come up here right after me and talk about it in a slide to kind of tell you what's going to happen. The second one, we somehow don't really have a good policies about cell phones, how we acquire them, how we buy them, how we pay for them. You know, there is a process there someplace, but I'm not sure that we understand it necessarily as an organization, nor that we really know how to make it work best in our behalf using the tax dollars that we have. We have seen everything all over the place. So this is one that by the next directors meeting, we'll have nailed down completely. Because we're looking at, do we need policy changes? Do we need to figure out how we do procurement differently? So more to come, and that's all I'm going to say about this. But that was probably number 2. Number 3, flex time. Flex time, 4-day work week, all of those things. They have come in over and over, working from home, all of that. So before we do anything or say anything, by the way, don't walk out of here saying, oh, we're going to make some changes. We got to figure out what we already have in terms of processes that can put in place. And I don't think that those are fully understood. We have not reviewed them for a number of years. So like I said, we are looking at this one. This is one that has come in over and over again and potentially can affect most employees overall. So right now, and I think that there's a survey already out to all of the divisions. What are you doing with the policies that are already in place? And what do you envision? So we will need your response, because I think your response is going to help us to look at this entire issue. So those were the top 3. Direct deposit, the whole cell phone issues, and then the third one is all the things. How do we work? What are the timing, etc. Those are the ones that we're addressing first. And by the way, every one of these needed multiple engagements from multiple divisions. We had to work with HR, we got to work with the DES folks, we got to work with looking at how we make this work. So this is, again, one of those cross-division opportunities that we all had to work together. All right, direct deposit, Tammy's up. You can. Okay, yeah.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So, as you likely know, direct deposit is a convenient, reliable, cost and time-saving alternative to paper checks, and it's a valuable benefit that we already provide to our employees, and a great number of our employees already use direct deposit. However, as Aldona mentioned, requiring direct deposit was something that came up over and over again in the RethinkLex initiative, and it came from all kinds of different employees and different divisions. So we created a committee, and we met on multiple occasions to talk about the feasibility of the project and determined it to be worthwhile and move forward. The nice thing about this initiative is it includes processes that we already have in place. We get to improve efficiencies, we get to save time and money, and we are utilizing our current system. So in moving forward, you're going to see some communication to all employees, informing them of the new requirement and instructions on how to complete enrollment in direct deposit. There'll be some additional communication that goes to payroll coordinators to assist with this as well. We're going to make information, instructions, and communication all available on LexLink, including an updated direct deposit form that Stacy's group helped us with. We're even creating a training module. So Lex TV folks are helping us create an online presentation whereby employees can go step by step and see how to enroll in direct deposit in PeopleSoft. And of course, payroll is going to be a valuable resource in this process when questions or concerns arise. Our deadline for employees to enroll in direct deposit, if they aren't already enrolled, is going to be January 6th, so it gives employees nearly 2 months to complete the enrollment process. And with that, what questions do you have? Favorite. And
I got one.
oh, yes.
So what happens if you have that one renegade that just doesn't sign up? He or she just not get paid?
That is to be determined. But we're going to have a lot of communication and assistance with folks to work through that process as easily as possible and to make it employee friendly. Any other questions? No. Thank you.
You know, one of the groups, when they submitted their RethinkLex, was the engineering group. And they actually submitted a little PowerPoint to look at some of the things that they felt they could do as a group. So the person here to talk about that submission is Josh. So Josh, come on up here.
Sure. So my name is Josh Tazarn. I'm here for Doug Burton today to discuss Division of Engineering's proposals for RethinkLex. So engineering is divided into 3 sections. We have the capital projects section, which is grant funded. We have the right-of-way section, which is permit funded, and we have the new development section, which is underfunded through the land disturbance permit. We've identified some of the issues with the land disturbance permit, why it's underfunded. And it's a construction permit that's required for all projects in Fayette County, whether it's a single-family home, a large multi-acre subdivision, or a commercial project like a McDonald's or even the Summit at Fritz Farm. We charge a $25 flat fee, regardless of the size. So we're able to process several home permits in a day, but if you have a large subdivision or a commercial project, that can be weeks or even months of a review period. And that's, it's a significant level of effort that's required to get those permits out. We also have a loophole that we call the developer builder loophole. So if you're a developer and you have a subdivision, you'll pay for your subdivision permit, but any subsequent home permits that you build in that subdivision, those are free right now. So we've got some solutions proposed to fix these issues. The first is to, instead of having a flat fee for all land disturbance permits, we're proposing a graduated fee schedule. So the larger the project, the larger the land disturbance permit fee would be. And we looked at several communities in the area, and Knoxville, Tennessee has a system like this, and that's what we modeled our proposal off of. We're also proposing to eliminate the developer builder loophole. So a developer would have to pay for their subdivision permit, and then they would have to pay for any lot permit that they have in that subdivision, where now they don't have to. And we're also proposing an application review fee similar to like a plan review fee, similar to what building inspection does. We oftentimes see a lot of incomplete submittals that haven't been checked in-house, and it's a lot of back and forth with the engineers and developers, and we feel if we had an application fee, it would incentivize people who submit plans to make sure that they're complete, that they've reviewed them in-house, and we feel that it would help streamline the process, and we could get the permits reviewed and issued quicker. And ultimately, our goal in this is to fully fund the new development section, and we believe we could generate close to $1 million in that effort. Any questions?
Any input?
How long have we had the current fee structure in place?
Ever since I've been here, and I got here in 2017, and it was like that. Hildred, how long?
Something like that. When we switched over from a grading permit to a land disturbance permit, out of it coming out of where that started.
And it's just a $25 nominal fee. And a lot of times I get calls from developers or engineers out of town wanting to know, they're doing preliminary work, and they ask me, all right, what's our fee structure? What do we have to pay for the land disturbance permit? When I tell them $25, they almost don't believe me. It's like, you're serious? $25? That's nothing, really.
Just to put something in context here is that, a developer has to pay for an application for a capacity assurance approval through water quality, $450. Same kind of thing is you don't get people just submitting stuff randomly. You've got to skin the game before they submit it, and that way it's pretty much right when you get it.
Charlie, is that true of other communities, or is it just Lexington that?
I've not researched it,
Okay.
As far as what the people are charging right now. If I remember correctly, back in 2010, the developing community was really worried about how the changes of our erosion and sediment control plan were going to impact them anyway. So I think we landed on a nominal fee, just not to keep them from marching down to the council and protesting everything. Because we were putting a lot more expectations on them because of the consent decree to begin with.
And we looked at Georgetown, and what we found is they may even charge a minimum of $500 for a similar permit. And then Knoxville's fees were much, much greater. And they were a graduated system based off the project size.
Well, I think this is probably a really good example of some additional research that we could do and really look to see how we address it. But that's exactly the kind of thing that I think we're looking for. Thank you, Josh.
You're welcome. Working on it.
Nicole's going to talk about how they're addressing the issues within the HR department.
Okay, so,
Use the mic. You're going to have to hold the mic.
so yeah, I just wanted to go over basically how we how we did it in our division, and maybe this will help you as you decide how to go about this in your division. Obviously, we're a pretty small division. I think we have about 22, and we're all in one location, so that makes it a lot easier. But if any of these ideas might help, where you might be able to adapt for your areas, then I think that's why I was kind of asked to share this information. So we actually referenced the process toolkit that we received. I mean, at each step in the process, I kept going back to that document to get guidance on what the expectations were, or, there's all kinds of ways we can do this. So just to kind of try to follow the ideas that we were given. So in our staff meetings, we asked for volunteers or nominations, and we wanted to make sure we got one from each section, and we did get that. And so then we selected our members, making sure, again, this is from the toolkit. So it included to make sure we had a mix of diverse perspectives, so age, race, sex, especially I thought, well, not especially, but one of the things that I think, and it was mentioned, it's in the toolkit, but years of service with government, because I think the tendency could be to think that the folks that have been here the longest, that we may think that they'd have the most ideas, and sometimes it's the folks that are coming in that haven't been here for very long that come in with a different perspective, maybe doing things differently from where they were. And then making sure they're comfortable speaking and sharing with folks, and able, of course, to attend and participate in the meetings. So the committee members were asked to meet with their individual sections and to use the conversation prompts that were in the toolkit. We didn't expect them to go through every single one formally, but to get the conversation going, I think there's some good ideas there that they could kind of pick from to just kind of get the conversation going. If there's a stall, they can look back at that and maybe get that going again. And also, we wanted to make sure they documented all suggestions. And the way our folks did it was, I think some of it they just had a computer right there, or they used our conference room where we had a big screen and they could type it right in kind of as folks shared. And the guidelines we gave them, and this to me I think is the biggest, most important thing. It's kind of the spirit of this process where we really want to encourage and support people who are sharing. There's a little bit of risk there sometimes when people are opening up to us and wanting to share, maybe fear of getting shot down and all those kinds of things. So we made sure our representatives know that our role was not to judge any ideas that were coming, obviously to try to steer the conversations a little differently if people were already throwing up barriers to someone's idea, but just to encourage that conversation. Hey, we're brainstorming, let's go ahead and write all these ideas down, that every voice is how did I phrase that? All voices and ideas matter. So that's what we really wanted to emphasize. And I also communicated, so I believe that even the complaints, and we did receive a couple that just kind of looked like, well, they were just complaints. I think even that is an opportunity potentially to affect change. And I think especially when we're asking employees to open up and share with us, of course it's supposed to be processes and efficiencies and all of these kinds of things, but I think when they get into that place of trust and they see this again potentially as an opportunity just to get their other concerns out there and hope that we might be able to address them. So just as a side note, the way we plan to address them, we see that as, we're looking at that as an opportunity that we can deal with within our divisions. Let's see. So overall for us, it was a positive experience, especially if I think because we engaged a committee of folks, because it was a lot of work, and we were trying to meet the original deadlines. So it was like, put the committee together, met with the committee, do your section meetings by the end of the week, get all your ideas entered into a spreadsheet. And so it was, but we worked very quickly, and actually I think that momentum was a good thing. It just really kept folks engaged and just really on top of, just all of us together and at the same time. It didn't drag on. So let's see. In total, just from within our division, from these section meetings, we collected 30 ideas, and we added them to a spreadsheet. So the next step, the next step was, how do you organize all of that data to then begin the discussion and prioritization process? Because that's our goal in this phase from what we understood. So let's see here. This is an example. These are some of the ideas that we received, and I just wanted to kind of show you the format that we used real quickly. So this is how it was laid out. The first column is the list of suggestions. So that's basically what the representatives, when they got this, their ideas, they would type it into that first column. And then the second and third columns we actually completed during our committee meetings. So I'll talk about that in a minute. But I actually, before we got together in our discussion prioritization meetings, I organized the data by adding the last two columns. There's a subject column and a category column. And I put some notes here at the bottom as to what those mean, but I'm not sure if you can see those. But the subject, and this was an idea that came out of our committee, and I was thinking about this as well, but it just makes sense. Especially if you've got a lot of ideas. If you've got some on, in our case, it was, I'm just going to say the hiring process of a certain subject, and it's like secondary subjects. So anyway, you might have some at the top, some at the bottom. I wanted to lump them all together so that when we would go into our committee meetings, we can talk about, basically grouping your ideas together so that it could just facilitate the actual the prioritization process. And then the categories, again, that idea came from the toolkit because there was an example survey in there that talked about what can we do right away, what are the things where we're going to need some additional support, what are the ideas that it would require us to coordinate with other divisions. So I was wanting to flag those as well, knowing that in the end when I reported this data that it would be helpful. So I wanted to do it before our committee meetings because I asked them to kind of give me input on that too if they felt strongly that should change. So, of course, I didn't put all of our ideas here, but I gave some examples of so when we got into our committee meeting, we went through each one very quickly. We didn't spend a lot of time on any one suggestion. Everyone read the suggestion. And started having discussions. And the discussions were basically, if we weren't clear on what the suggestion was, we might have made some notes. I was typing while people were speaking. Of course, I was involved in that as well. But adding notes to clarify any of the suggestions. And often, I found that, and I think you'll find, that people will start talking about, well, what about this or what about that? Starting to think about feasibility and how we would implement, or maybe some of the barriers, or those kinds of things. Again, to honor some of the things of what they were saying, but also to try to stick with the plan that we're trying to prioritize, make some notes, we'll decide about feasibility or have those conversations later. We want to get through prioritizing. So, made a few notes. If we needed to, throw me some numbers. If I'd hear numbers, it was kind of like one of those little auctions. I'm hearing 2, 3, 2, 1, 2. And so then whatever I kind of heard, kind of the most, okay, I'm hearing 2, and so, we throw a number and they're go on to the next one. So again, we were moving through them pretty quickly. Let's see, and I think, yeah, so we just used a numeric scale, and yep, I think that's everything. So do y'all have any questions? Okay, thank you. Oh. Yeah, absolutely. That was kind of the plan. It's to not let you necessarily read the details. But for example, and I did change some of the language since this was just for demonstration purposes, just to simplify it, because some of them, it was a lot of information. So, of course, we had the mandatory direct deposit. And so for that one, and it was longer as far as why someone thought that we should have that. And the note that we added in that case, because we happened to know that the implementation of that was underway, so we just jotted a quick note because we didn't have to do that, but in our discussion meeting, we didn't want to spend a lot of time on that. And some of the committee members didn't know, so it was just like, well, that one's underway. I went ahead and typed it in. We threw a priority on it. We believe that that is very important, because people all, in that group were very supportive of it, and thought it was a great idea, and went on about why they thought it. And so try to get us to move on. We threw a 1, moved on to the next one. List of employee discounts. So I wanted to add a couple of these kinds of things to show you, if you did read it, that we got a request to have a list of employee discounts. Well, that is also underway. I'm working with Stacy's office to get that on our intranet. So that's, those are always some feel-good things. We can do it right away. In fact, they're already coming. The first one, you might notice I skipped that one. Sharing administrative staff. The idea was not just to share, maybe administrative staff within our division amongst the different sections, because I think we tend to think that because they are, have a lot to do within their own sections, and some people don't have administrative support, so our managers are starting to, since we've read this, it was just kind of a reminder to them to offer to the other managers, hey, if you need some help, they may have some time this, in December or whatever to help with filing or scanning, those kinds of things. So it was divisions, and they were even suggesting potentially like outside of our division, maybe within departments. And I think I heard that some of that is even going on already. So I think this is something we can definitely move forward. And that's where you'll see we put a category A. An example of that is, this is something we can do right away, at least within our own division. How are we doing on time? Because I can go down some more. Let's see. Okay. Let me see. A tricky one. Well, it's just another example of where Aldona, was talking about earlier. What about allowing employees to work from home? I think we probably had about at least maybe 4 or 5. And we did get a bit of a preview of some that were coming in from other through the online and email links. And so we saw that as well, that was a frequently mentioned topic. And of course, it's all in the news, right? They tried that out in Japan, and 40% productivity increases and all this kind of thing. So I think people, everyone's thinking about that. So the subject you'll see that I threw on that was, I considered that a benefit. It is part of our Flex program, and I could, a lot of this stuff really is available. It's up to you what would work in your areas. But anyway, benefits, and I threw telecommuting on there. Put a B because that's not something we could do on our own. It would require additional support, approval through the CAO office, before we could even start thinking about how, maybe clarifying or reminding division directors and supervisors that some of these flexible scheduling options, maybe we can give more consideration to those kinds of things if possible, if it's possible in your areas. Maybe not for everyone, maybe some, based on the jobs that they do. And we put 4 on it, not because we don't think it's important, but I think it was compared to a lot of the other stuff we had, because you can imagine that varying opinions, especially the person who gave you the idea, thinks it's very important. And so there's kind of a bit of that comparative level of priorities. And then, let's see, developing an online training module for recurring mandatory policy training. I love this. We've been wanting to do this for so long, so we're super excited. And it's not even something that ended up starting to happen out of HR, so yay. It kind of came from other areas, and so now we get to jump on board as far as, my understanding is we're getting the technology to be able to put links online where you can watch, and you might have seen, anybody who's online sees examples of this where you can watch a training module. You could even acknowledge that you watched it. Some of them have little quizzes or something at the end. Some of them have ways that they can make sure you went through all the slides if it was a slide for. Anyway, there's all kinds of ways to do it. We just happened to note again so that we wouldn't spend too much time on this because conversations started happening, and just to kind of help move it along, we did note that that's starting to happen already. And then just made some notes again, just from the conversations that folks had, just to kind of help reassure them that their ideas might be considered in the later stages of this project when our division directors, when the commissioners, in our case the CEO, starts talking about feasibility and desirability. I didn't mention that, and this is the last thing that I'm going to say unless there's anything else you want me to talk about, but that is so huge. That I really wanted to emphasize, and when I shared the list with our director as well, is that what we're documenting, it's not that we're saying we like it or that, that we think it's possible, but it's just recognizing that somebody has shared this with us and valuing that input. And if it's just like a training thing or making someone aware of why we're doing something a certain way and why we can't, but also being open-minded of, instead of just shooting it down, are there other things that we can do, that kind of thing. We didn't make those kinds of judgments. We left all ideas on the table. It was kind of a transparency thing and just honoring to move that up through the change for others to consider, because we felt like that wasn't our we weren't asked to do that. So that's all I have. Okay, thank you.
I just want to point out a couple of things. The last part about the training, and this actually came, we submitted it as part of RethinkLex, but that came from Chris Edwards. And so one of the things that is happening in organizations, and we're one of them, that could take advantage of such training programs. I've worked in the private sector most of my career, and there are a couple companies, you have a module that you have to go through. One of them, is to make sure that we had the appropriate HR training, for instance, harassment training, etc. You have to go through the module. You have to take the test at the end. If you don't, and if you don't do it by a certain date, you would not get your travel approved, and you would have no email. Pretty drastic. And one of the areas where we're struggling with, and you all know this right now, is cybersecurity. We're getting attacked, phishing, explorations, all kinds of things going on all the time. And in order to really reach every employee at some point, this is one area where we believe that we could take advantage of that. All right, let's talk about timelines, because we were very definitive about time when we wanted things submitted. So I've asked Arthur to come and discuss what we're doing with the timelines and a little bit more flexibility. But I've also asked him to provide you some input, because he sees a lot of people every single day, and he's got some good stories.
I'm speechless now. Well, good morning, everyone. As far as covering the timeline, and as conversation has went on, Aldona's already talked about the fact that November the 11th was the cutoff date. And we look at that from an executive committee standpoint as a good thing, because we have all divisions that are participating in RethinkLex, as well as we have received over 700 suggestions and ideas. Some are duplicated, but I think when the mayor first talked about RethinkLex, she talked about the fact that this was a bottom up. And I think it's a great to see so many suggestions and ideas, especially coming from our employees. As far as all submittals being reviewed and categorized, when you have 700 plus suggestions and ideas, it's going to take time to go through all of those. Just like everyone in this room, the executive committee, we have jobs and we have daily tasks that we're doing outside of RethinkLex. So that's one of the reasons that it is the dates are being moved back as opposed to moved up, because we thought about the process that we're going through, and it is going to take more time than what we initially thought. After the review, divisions will receive a list of submitted ideas for further consideration. Now, one of the things with this particular bullet point, obviously the divisions are submitting ideas about their own divisions, but as Tammy and some others have already stated, you have other divisions are submitting ideas about different divisions as well. And what we want to make sure when we're going through and categorizing all the suggestions and ideas is that if it affects a particular division, we want to make sure that that division sees what others are discussing and talking about, or what suggestions might be coming from another division. And then that's where, the last bullet point as far as divisions should continue this list with the list developed internally and prioritize full suggestions. And we've talked about that. Now, one of the things that Aldona was talking about in my role as a diversity officer, I interact with practically all of the different divisions, and I'm a firm believer in RethinkLex because I too originally came from corporate America, and I know how things work when you say it's the top down. The bottom line is you're giving tasks to do and you're told that this is what you're going to do, versus an organization like LFUCG where we're saying, hey, we want to know what our employees think. We want to know what ideas, what suggestions can make us more efficient, improve our processes. And I know that in some of my travels, I've talked with some people that are somewhat down on the process. But I just want to ask everyone to be open. Obviously, we're being open because every division has submitted information. But again, we're working to make improvements for LFUCG. I haven't been at LFUC. I'm just coming up on my third year. But in my 30-plus year career in management, I think this is one of the greatest things that I've seen, whether it be with UPS or state government. But our Rethink Group Lex executive committee, we're always open to sitting down and having discussions about, ideas and thoughts that you have about your divisions. And again, I've heard some of the comments as far as some people don't think this is going to work, or I've heard the comments, every administration tries to do this. But I think today is a prime example of RethinkLex starting, us taking some of the ideas and suggestions and moving forward with it. So I, like I said, I personally think this is a great opportunity for us to improve LFUCG. Okay, all right, well, yeah, that's my slide. Thank you, boss. I don't know if people noticed, but I tried to dress like my boss today, tops. But as far as this slide here, internal review committees should provide input on the prioritized list. And that's one of the things that we talked about early on, is making sure that our employees at all levels are involved. Because again, we're management in here, and we know how it is to go and tell employees what they're going to do versus asking them for their input. Am I fading out? Gone? More guidance will be provided to give direction on how to prioritize and responding using the Excel file. And that's one of the good things about this. We're going to actually categorize all the suggestions and ideas. And again, we're going to make sure that each individual division receives information. So we're doing this in a consistent format and making sure that all information is going back to the divisions. And then we anticipate divisions may need December and early January to complete the discussion. And I think this is where Aldona was talking about the timelines, where we had set these solid concrete timelines, but as RethinkLex has progressed, we're realizing that we need to, I guess take a pause, if you will, and slow down as far as making sure that we're doing it the right way. And I think that's one of the most important things. We don't want to just receive ideas and suggestions, but we want to make sure that we're able to vet them and implement some of the ideas that we're able to move forward with. Any more slides? No more slides. Any questions about anything? All right, thank you.
Okay, I just want to highlight a couple of things. You saw a good example when HR did their prioritization. So we know that the larger organizations are going to have many, many suggestions, and they're going to have to prioritize those. But some may be 5, 10, 15, 20. But please understand that probably we'd like for you to narrow it down to no more than the top 5 to 10 or so, because we're not going to be able to look at that. Bullet number 2 on here is important. We want to also provide you a good way to report this out. We're now internally debating, should that be a spreadsheet of some kind and whatnot, but we'll get that to you as soon as we can, because we want to get it to you in some organized form so you can feed it back to us in some organized form. And we want to do that fairly quickly. So look for a way for you to have sort of a format in how we want this reported out. Now, there is no slide for that, but early on we talked about what are the incentives. What are we going to do? There's some opportunities, and there is no slide this morning, but I do have Tyler Scott here, and I've asked him to discuss what we're talking about incentives.
All right, yeah, we talked about incentives last go around, and we're still vetting an ever-growing list of possibilities. The first one we're ready to roll out, and I think the plan will be to distribute at the commissioners meeting on Monday, will be the $50 gift cards, which will go one to each division, and we'll leave it to each division director's discretion on how to conduct the drawing for those in your division that have been active participants in this up to date. So this isn't based on reward for a particular idea. This is just an incentive for participation so far. So like I said, we'll work to get that out along with a refresher on who's eligible and who isn't. Of course, middle and upper management aren't eligible for this particular incentive, but we'll work to get those out on Monday to all commissioners, and we'll move forward with the rest of the list from there. Any questions?
All right. I promised that we would try to get this done between 45 minutes to an hour, so we're almost on track. Anybody got any comments or anything? Yes?
Is it possible to submit too much information, too much detail in ideas?
There is, but I'll tell you, if personally I had to err on the side, I'd rather have more than less. Because sometimes when you have less information to really understand what the suggestion was, we all make judgments. And I think that the more information you have, we can always pare it down. That's really sort of, I think, that the guidelines that we've been working on. Now, internally, you might set your own rules or guidelines about how long you want people to talk or to what extent. Because, this takes time to listen to people. And sometimes our time is very, very short. But anyway, that's a very good question. So continue the division meetings. Communicate with your team, and there's probably nothing more important than that. And if nothing else, communication probably is one of the most important things. You may think that we're over-communicating, but sometimes we got to say the same thing over and over and over again. So call for help if you need it. All of us are willing to come and talk to your group, provide some guidelines if that's what you're looking for. And I just noticed that we left Glenda, George's last name, off the slide. So I hope, is Glenda here? Sorry, Glenda. All of us are willing to come. All of us are willing to participate. And we already have. We did 2 lunch and learns. I did both of them. We've had 4 or 5 organizations come and participate both times, and that actually worked very, very well. So there's only 2 things I ask: reserve judgment and encourage people often. And if there are no other questions, December the 6th is the next meeting, and you'll hear the next install. Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, Brad?
My memory is there were like a couple of financial components to the project that were separate, like the budget process and maybe the financial
There are.
underpinnings of the whole government's public finance system. Are those projects still going on? And
They are.
will we
They're
hear
still
about
going
that?
on. And I don't know if I know exactly where they stand, but we can find out and hopefully have I'm sorry. Tyler, do you want to comment on that? All right, but we'll probably can give you an update at December the 6th about where they stand. Brad, December the 6th, we'll try to get those updates. Anything else? One more.
So I know we're one of the anomalies because we have so many people and
Yes.
we can't get them all together. So what we did was we had representatives go out and collect lists of suggestions. So our division alone, I haven't counted them, but probably has over 400.
Wow.
So now we're at a point where you're saying narrow it down.
Yes.
Well, the problem, I'm just going to tell you the problem I have is our employees want to know what we're sending. They don't want
Okay.
it to be sanitized by the administration. So how do we get around that with that many suggestions?
I'll tell you one way you can pare it down. First of all, if you want to send us all 400, most of us will be happy to read them. But I'll tell you one of the things that you can do is maybe pick the ones that you can act on right away without having to share it with anybody. You can
Okay.
send them all to us.
Okay.
Because one of the things that we want to encourage, and I think that there's from the discussions that we've had, there are things that are suggestions that are being made internally within your own organizations that you can act upon immediately. And that in itself is something that you can report back to the employee. By the way, we're doing this.
Okay.
Then there are some that are going to require either budget or are going to require some changes or whatnot. But if you want to send us all 400, we will accept them and read them. And actually, I will do that personally.
Okay, because they wanted to see what we were sending.
Absolutely.
The list
Yeah.
that we're sending
Yeah.
and make sure like their suggestion was still there.
Right. And you can actually then report that you have sent that.
Okay, good enough.
Anything else? All right. Thank you for being here, and see you on December the 6th.